Wyoming Territory, August 1881. The sun was dropping low over the Wind River Range when the stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the town of Dry Creek, its wheels kicking up dust that clung to everything like a bad memory. Mabel Hargrove stepped down, boots hitting the earth like she meant to stay though she had no real plan to. Her deep green dress was creased from the ride, her hands stained with ink from a letter she read too many times. She looked like a woman who had lost too much and expected to lose more. She had 2 children with her. Kit, her boy of 10, held her hand tighter than he had in days. He had his father's eyes and none of his kindness. His sister, 6-year-old Kate, clung to a ragged doll and looked up at her mother like she was the only thing left in a world that had turned cruel. The telegraph office was closed, the boarding house was full, and her last dollar had been spent on that coach ticket from Nebraska. Mabel's jaw tightened. She had left behind a grave and a man who had abandoned them long before he died. Love had not saved her. It had emptied her. "Ma," Kit whispered. "What do we do now?" Before she could answer, the sound of hooves drew their eyes to the street. A tall man on a sorrel horse slowed to a stop beside them. He dismounted like he had done it 1,000 times, dusting his long coat as he approached. Sunlight caught the curve of his jaw and the crease at the corner of his eyes. "You folks lost?" he asked, voice low and warm. Mabel straightened. "We are not lost, just passing through." He glanced at the children, then back at her. "That's so? Town's no place to bed down with little ones. Name's Asa Callahan. I got a ranch south of here. You look like you could use a roof and a meal." "I do not take charity, Mr. Callahan." He looked at her steady. "I am not offering charity. I am offering help." Mabel hesitated, eyes narrowing. "Why?" He took off his hat, brushing a hand through his dark blonde hair. "Because I have known what it is to be left standing with nothing but dust in your lungs. And I do not like watching a woman and her children sleep in the dirt." Kate tugged at Mabel's skirt. "Mama, I'm tired." Mabel did not trust strangers, especially ones with kind eyes and easy manners. But she had 2 children who had not eaten since dawn, and she was out of options. "We will stay the night," Mabel said. "One night." Asa nodded. "That is all I ask." His ranch was a few miles outside town, tucked against the foothills, where the grass grew tall and the wind moved like it was carrying secrets. Mabel rode beside him in silence while the children dozed in the back of his wagon. She kept her back straight, her chin high, but Asa noticed the tremble in her fingers when she thought he was not looking. The house was simple but clean: 2 rooms, a wood stove, a porch that faced west. He cooked supper without asking for help, frying salt pork and potatoes, setting plates in front of her and the children like it was the most natural thing in the world. Kate fell asleep on a quilt beside the stove. Kit leaned against the wall, eyes heavy. Mabel sat at the table, her hand around a chipped mug of coffee. "You said you have known being left," she said quietly. Asa sat across from her. "My wife died 8 years ago. Fever took her. We had no children. After that, I stopped believing in much of anything." She nodded. "I stopped believing in love the day my husband walked out and never came back. And then I buried him. Seems cruel, how grief does not end just because the person is gone." Asa looked at her, his gaze steady. "Then believe in me." Her breath caught. "You do not even know me. I know what I see. A woman fighting for her children. A woman still standing when most would have fallen. That's enough for now." Mabel stood. "We will leave in the morning. I do not want to owe anyone. I am not asking for anything, Mabel. But if you want to rest longer, the door is open." She looked at her children curled against the warmth, faces soft with sleep. She did not say thank you. She nodded once and sat back down. The next days passed slow and full. Mabel stayed because Kate fell ill with a cough, and Asa drove into town for herbs and broth without being asked. Kit followed Asa around the barn, watching with quiet curiosity as he mended fence rails and watered the horses. Mabel tried to pay her way mending shirts, sweeping floors, cooking meals when her hands were not shaking from exhaustion. One evening, she stood outside, watching the sun pour gold over the hills. Asa came up beside her, arms crossed. "Thinking of leaving?" "Thinking I should." He nodded. "And do you want to?" She looked at him. "I do not know how to want anything anymore." Asa looked at her, and this time he stepped closer. "You do not have to believe in love, Mabel. Just believe in the way your children smile here. Believe in the way your hands have steadied. Believe in the way I look at you and how I will not stop." She turned her head, eyes shining. "I am afraid." "So am I," Asa said. "But I still want to try." The wind stirred her hair. For the first time in years, she let herself lean into someone's warmth. That night, Kit crawled into bed without protest. Kate slept without coughing. Mabel sat on the porch, fingers laced tight in her lap. Asa brought her a blanket. "I do not know how to be anything but broken," she whispered. "You are not broken," Asa said. "You are just tired of holding everything alone." She looked at him. "And if I fall apart? Then I will be there to hold you together." She did not kiss him. Not yet. But her hand brushed his, and she did not pull away. For the first time, the stars felt like they were shining for her. Mabel rose before the light reached the windows, careful not to wake the children. The floorboards whispered under her feet as she crossed to the basin, splashing her face with cold water drawn the night before. Her hands froze in the chill, but it steadied her. She braided her hair by touch, eyes still heavy with sleep, then stepped quietly outside. A low layer of mist clung to the pasture. The horse pen stretched quiet and still, the faint sound of hooves shifting in the dirt. She followed the path to the barn, unsure of what she meant to do, only knowing her body needed movement. Asa was already there, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hauling a salt block into the corner stall. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You always rise before the sun?" she asked, voice low. He set the block down with a grunt and straightened. "Old habit. Comes from having stock and nothing but your own 2 hands to keep them alive." Mabel stepped closer, brushing straw from a rail. "I don't like sleeping too long. Makes me feel like I'm missing something." He leaned against the post, watching her. "What are you afraid you'll miss?" She looked around the barn, at the walls patched with old boards, the tools hanging in neat order. "The chance to stop running." He nodded slowly. "Well, you're standing still now." Mabel blinked, eyes on the dust motes rising in the warmth. "I don't know how long I can stay in one place." "You don't have to know," Asa said. "You just have to keep standing still until it feels less like a trap." When she turned to leave, he didn't follow. But when she glanced back, he was still watching her, not like a man waiting for something, but like he was simply glad she was there. Later that morning, she washed linens in a copper tub behind the house, sleeves rolled, arms sore from wringing. Kate crouched nearby, drowsy under the sun, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Kit had gone with Asa to fetch lumber from a neighbor's homestead 2 miles east. Mabel hadn't wanted to let him go, but Kit had looked at her with such quiet certainty she couldn't refuse. The air smelled of soap and pine. Chickens scratched near the shed, and the wind tugged at the corner of the clothesline. "Ma," Kate said, not looking up, "are we gonna live here now?" Mabel squeezed the last sheet, twisting it hard. "It's not our place, sweetheart." "But Mr. Asa said we could stay," Kate said. "He let Kit ride in the front today." Mabel hung the sheet, her jaw tight. "Sometimes people are kind, even if they don't owe you kindness." Kate glanced up. "You don't smile here, Mama." but your shoulders look less tired. Mabel crouched beside her, brushing the child's hair behind her ear. I'm trying. Kate nodded solemnly, then went back to her drawing. That evening, the wagon returned with a soft rattle of wheels over dry earth. Kit leapt down before it stopped moving, dusty and flushed from sun and wind. He carried a rolled piece of canvas that looked too heavy for him, but he refused Asa's help. Mabel met them at the porch, drying her hands on her skirt. You made good time. Boy works hard, Asa said. Knows how to listen. Kit stood tall, chest puffed, then ran inside to show Kate the pine cone he'd found. Mabel lingered. Thank you for letting him come. I didn't do it for thanks, Asa said, stepping up beside her. But I'm glad you gave him the chance. She didn't answer. Not right away. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in colors she hadn't looked at properly in years. He turned slightly toward her. I want to show you something tomorrow. Something I think might help. Her eyes narrowed. What is it? You'll see. Only takes a few hours on horseback. Kids can stay with my neighbor's wife. She's got 7 of her own and more chickens than names. Mabel opened her mouth to refuse, but stopped. I don't ride well. I'll take it slow. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. All right. The next morning, Mabel wore the only riding skirt she owned, boots scuffed from years of wear. Asa had saddled 2 horses, one gentle and wide-backed. She mounted awkwardly, but he said nothing, only waited until she found her balance before leading her west. They rode in silence, the quiet kind that didn't press. The trail wound through open grassland, then cut into a narrow canyon where cottonwoods clustered near a creek. Mabel rode stiff at first, but as the hours passed, her grip loosened. The wind lifted her hair, and she let it. At midday, they reached a high ridge overlooking a stretch of untouched valley. Wildflowers bloomed in scattered clusters, and the land rolled soft to the horizon. Asa dismounted and tied his reins. Mabel followed, legs aching. What is this place? She asked, breath catching. He stepped beside her. My claim. Filed it last spring but haven't built yet. I've been waiting for a reason to start. Mabel stared at the open land, heart pounding. Why bring me here? Because I want you to see something that isn't broken. She turned toward him, throat dry. You think I could belong to something like this? I think you already do, he said. You just haven't let yourself believe it yet. She stared at the horizon, where the land rose like a promise. I don't know if I can love again. I'm not asking for love, Asa said. I'm asking for a chance to build something steady. If that turns into love, I'll be grateful. But if it doesn't, I'll still be beside you. She looked at him, the quiet strength in his stance, the way the wind didn't move him. Then she took a breath that felt like the first in years. I don't want to run anymore, she said. Then don't, he answered. Stay. Let's build something that doesn't need to be perfect, just real. Mabel didn't speak. She stepped closer instead, and when she reached for his hand, she didn't let go. The first snow came early that year. Not a storm, just a hush of white across the high grass and fence rails, enough to remind the valley that autumn was nearly gone. Mabel stood at the edge of the barnyard with her shawl pulled tight, watching her children chase each other through the frost-dusted stalks of last summer's garden. Inside the house, the fire had burned low, and the scent of dried sage hung faint in the air where she had boiled water for Kate's sore throat. The girl's cough had eased, and she was strong enough now to run with her brother, cheeks ruddy with cold. Asa had gone to check the north fence line. He'd left before dawn, saddle creaking and breath white in the dark. Mabel had watched from the window until his shape vanished into the trees, the sound of hooves swallowed by frozen soil. When he returned near midday, His coat was stiff with ice where creek water had splashed up during the crossing. He unsaddled his horse slowly, shoulders hunched against the wind. Mabel brought him a tin cup of coffee, hands wrapped in her apron for warmth. "You find what needed fixing?" she asked. "2 posts down near the ridge," he said, blowing on the coffee before taking a sip. "Cattle haven't wandered yet, but they will if I leave it. I can ride out with you tomorrow," she said, "if you want the help." He looked over at her hand, resting lightly on the fence rail. "You don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to. I just don't like being useless." Asa set the cup down and turned to face her fully. "You keep this place running when I'm gone. That's not nothing." Mabel didn't answer right away. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of snow and pine from the ridge. After a moment, she leaned her arms on the rail, watching the way the children disappeared and reappeared beneath the sagging stalks. "Sometimes I think I'm waiting for something to go wrong," she said quietly, "as if it's owed to me. You think you don't deserve peace? I think I don't know what to do with it." Asa didn't speak, just stepped beside her and stood there until the wind died down. That night, after the children had fallen asleep on quilts laid out near the stove, Mabel sat at the table mending the seam of Kit's only good shirt. Asa brought in a bundle of dry wood and stacked it by the hearth. "You always working?" he asked, brushing snow from his sleeves. "Idle hands make me uneasy." He pulled a chair out, easing into it. "I used to think quiet meant something was missing. Now I think it's the only time I can hear what's true." Mabel glanced up from her stitching. "And what's true for you?" "That I want more of this," he said. "Of you. Of the way this house feels when you're in it." She set the shirt down. Her fingers were raw from the needle, but she barely noticed. "I don't know what I have left to give." "You give it every day," he said, voice low. "In the way you watch over those children. In the way you carry things that would break most folk. You don't have to call it love. Just let it keep growing." Mabel looked down at the shirt. "I've never asked for more than safety for them. Not since Nebraska. And now, I don't know how to want something that isn't survival." Asa reached across the table, his hand resting palm up. "Steady. Then start small. Want a warm stove. Want someone to ride beside you. Want a place where no one leaves without saying goodbye." She didn't take his hand. Not yet. But she set hers on the table, close enough that their knuckles touched. The next morning they rode out together. Mabel wore an old wool coat that belonged to Asa's late sister, too broad at the shoulders but warm. The sky was the color of tin, and the fence posts wore small caps of snow. They didn't speak much during the ride. The rhythm of hooves and leather creak said enough. At the broken stretch of fence, Mabel held the rails steady while Asa hammered in a replacement post. Her gloves were stiff with cold, fingertips numb, but she didn't complain. When the work was done, they sat on a fallen log and shared bread wrapped in cloth from the saddlebag. Asa poured coffee from a battered tin flask, handing her the first cup. "I still think about her," he said after a long pause. "Not because I loved her more than I could anyone else, but because she was the first person who made me think I could stay still." Mabel watched the steam rise from her cup. "Do you think it's wrong, wanting something new?" "No," he said. "I think it's a kind of hope. And I'd rather hold that than nothing." She turned her face toward the wind, feeling it sting her cheeks and clear her thoughts. "I don't know if I can ever say the words. Not like I used to." "You don't have to say anything," Asa said. "Just don't walk away." Mabel looked at him then, really looked, until her chest ached with the truth of how much she wanted this man, this place, this quiet strength wrapped in frost and fence wire. She reached out and brushed a bit of hay from his collar. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, she laid her mended sewing aside without finishing it. As the fire burned low and the house settled into silence, she stepped to Asa's side, resting her head against his shoulder. He didn't speak, just brought her hand to his chest, holding it there, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like something waiting to be broken. She felt like something chosen, something home. The days shortened, light coming late and leaving early, and the work turned heavier with the cold. Mabel spent more hours in the root cellar than above it, her hands raw from sorting potatoes and setting jars straight. Snow had started to collect in the shady corners of the yard, not enough to trap them in, but enough to mark the shift. She'd begun sewing curtains from an old muslin sheet to hang over the bedroom window. The wind found every crack in the walls come nightfall, and Kate had taken to curling beneath the quilts with her doll tucked under her chin. Kit, more self-contained than ever, had started whittling things out of leftover kindling shapes Mabel couldn't quite name, but she kept each one near the stove all the same. One afternoon, as the sun slipped behind a low band of clouds, Asa came in with a bruised shoulder and a torn sleeve. Mabel saw the blood before he said a word. What happened? He winced as he unbuttoned his coat. Colt got spooked near the woodshed. I tried to steady him and caught the gate on the way down. She took his arm without asking and guided him to the bench by the hearth. Sit still. I need the basin. Asa watched her cross the room, his voice low. You're not angry? She set the water on the fire hook and turned to him. Angry at a man for doing what needs doing? No. But I don't like seeing you torn up. Asa exhaled slowly. Didn't think I'd feel it so much. It's been a while since anyone noticed when something hurt. Mabel didn't answer. She fetched the clean cloth she'd set aside for patching and soaked it when the water was ready. When she peeled back the torn fabric, her touch was careful, but the tenderness between them had shifted. No longer hesitant, just known. That'll bruise something awful, she said. You should see the gate. She gave a soft sound, almost a laugh, and dipped the cloth again. You're lucky it wasn't your head. I thought of that, but I figured you wouldn't let me die easy. Not if I can help it. He looked at her then, a long look that said more than it needed to. She pressed the cloth to his shoulder again, voice even. You ever think about leaving this place? No, he said. I built it to stay. She was quiet a moment. I never stayed anywhere without knowing I might have to go. His gaze didn't waver. Then maybe it's time to unlearn that. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Asa opened the cedar box he kept beneath the work table in the barn. He brought out a folded piece of canvas and spread it on the table inside the house maps and lines sketched in charcoal, a rough plan of the house he meant to build on the second stretch of land. Mabel looked down at the drawing, her voice low. You've already started planning. I've been planning for a while. Just didn't know who I was planning for. She traced the edge of the drawing, where he'd marked a garden plot and a root cellar. You make space for everything. I meant to have a place big enough for someone who's carried more than her share. She didn't look up. You still want to build it? Yes, he said, but only if you help decide where the windows go. She folded the canvas slowly and set it back in his hands. Then I want a window that faces east. I like waking to light. He nodded once. We'll start when the ground thaws. The next day, Mabel took Kate into town to visit Mrs. Foley, the widow who kept chickens and sometimes traded preserves for thread. Kit stayed with Asa, helping split wood and carry it into the shed. When they returned, the scent of smoke and pine sap lingered in the air, and the woodpile had been stacked higher than Mabel remembered it. That night, while the wind rattled the shutters and the fire cracked low, Mabel lay awake beside the warmth of Kate's small frame. She listened to the quiet rhythm of breath and the wind outside. Beside the hearth, Asa sat carving something from a piece of pine, not speaking, just present. She rose without waking the girl and crossed the room, the floor cold beneath her feet. "You're still working?" Asa didn't look up. "Just thinking." She sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. "About what?" "About how it could be. With you. With them. If we let it." She looked toward the wall where the coats hung, his and hers side by side. "I've never had a life that didn't feel borrowed. Then maybe it's time to claim one." She didn't answer right away, just leaned her shoulder into his, resting there, not as a question but as a choice. He set the carving aside and turned toward her, his voice quiet enough to be trusted. "I don't need promises. Not yet. I just need to know you mean to stay." She lifted her chin and met his eyes. "I do." He reached for her hand, not like a man asking, but like one who'd been handed something worth keeping. She let her fingers curl into his. Outside, the wind slowed. Inside, the fire burned steady. By late February, the soil had hardened beneath a crust of ice, and the wind carried a bite that settled deep in the bones. The valley lay quiet in its stillness, sky pale and hollow above the snow-heavy ridge. Mabel sat at the table, fingers curled around a cup of steeped chamomile, watching the steam rise like breath from a weary chest. Asa came in from the woodshed, boots dusted white, and shook off his coat before hanging it by the door. He moved carefully, shoulders still stiff from the colt's panic weeks earlier. Mabel had noticed him rubbing it when he thought she wasn't looking. "I passed by the creek bend," he said, "where the willows lean. There were tracks elk, I think. Big ones." She looked up from the cup. "You think they're moving down early?" "It's possible. Might be a thinner spring than usual." Mabel nodded, setting the cup down. "I could start soaking beans tonight. We'll stretch what we've got." Asa leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You always think 3 steps ahead. That's how you keep children fed in lean seasons." She paused, then added, "And how you keep your footing when the ground gives under you." He studied her a moment, then pushed off the wall and stepped closer. "You've been waiting for something to fall apart since the day you got here." "I've lived through things that did," she said plainly. "I know," Asa said, "but not everything breaks. Some things hold." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood, walked to the shelf by the window, and pulled down a small wooden box. Inside were folded papers, letters, receipts, and the deed to her late husband's farm. The last thing that tied her to Nebraska. "I want to be rid of this," she said, holding it out. "I want to let it go, but I don't know how." Asa took the box gently. "Come with me." They rode out to the fire pit behind the barn, where the snow had been cleared and the ground was dry beneath the stones. Asa stacked kindling and lit it, the flame catching slow and steady. Mabel stood with the box pressed to her chest. He didn't speak again. He just waited, quiet as always. She opened the lid, pulled out the deed, and held it over the fire. Curled at the edges, darkened, then caught. She dropped it into the flames. One by one, each paper followed. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. When it was done, she knelt near the fire, tears streaking her cheeks without sound. Asa sat beside her, knees drawn up, hands resting loosely between them. "I thought burning it would feel like forgetting," she said. "It's not forgetting," Asa said. "It's choosing what you carry forward." She looked at him, then down at the ashes. "I want to carry something else now." His hand found hers, fingers rough. "Sure. Carry me, if you'll have me." She turned her face toward him, eyes full and steady. "I already do." That spring, they began building the new house. The ground thawed slow, but they worked with what they had. Asa cut timbers with care, measuring twice, always twice. Mabel marked lines where the walls would rise, her handwriting neat and sure. Kit helped drive nails with a solemn focus, and Kate carried water from the creek in her small tin pail, her cheeks smudged with earth. One morning, after they had raised the beams for the front porch, Mabel stood beneath their shape and looked out over the valley. "This land feels different now," she said. Asa set down his hammer. "It's yours as much as mine." "No," she said gently. "It's ours." They married in May beneath the cottonwoods by the ridge, with Mrs. Foley standing in as witness and Kate carrying wildflowers in her apron. Kit stood beside Asa, quiet and proud, a carved bird tucked in his palm he'd made it himself, and gifted it to Mabel after the ceremony. There was no grand celebration, just a shared meal, strong coffee, and a slow dance in the field with the wind lifting Mabel's hem and Asa's arm wrapped around her waist. She rested her head against his chest, and for the first time in her life, the silence around her felt full. By midsummer, the new house stood firm and ready, its east-facing window catching the first light of day. They moved in with little fuss. Mabel hung the curtains she'd sewn through the cold months, and Asa built a bench for the porch where they often sat in the evenings, watching the children chase fireflies in the growing dusk. On the first night in their new home, Mabel lay beside Asa with the window open and the scent of sagebrush drifting in. "I used to think love was something you survived," she said softly. "And now I think it's something you build, nail by nail, day by day." Asa turned toward her, his hand resting over hers, fingers warm. "Then let's build until our hands give out." She smiled, eyes closing as the breeze moved over them. "We will." Years passed. The valley changed, but their home remained rooted. Kit grew taller than his mother and took to carpentry, building furniture that outlasted storms. Kate learned to read by lamplight and took over the garden rows by the age of 10, her hands firm in the soil. Mabel and Asa grew older with the land. They weathered dry years and good harvests, laughter and grief, but always together. Every morning, she woke to the light pouring through the east window she had asked for. Every night, Asa's hand found hers beneath the quilts. And through it all, there was no more running, no more waiting for the ground to fall. Only the steadiness of love, built strong and real, the way wind shapes stone with time, with patience, and with the quiet strength of those who choose to stay.